girl as young as Daenerys commanded not one, but 3 dragons. Aemond was a boy of 10 when he claimed Vhagar, the largest dragon alive, and bent her to his will. So what is it about Targaryens that makes dragons follow their commands? What is it about their blood that makes the dragons see them as friends instead of food? Some say it's the blood magic that ancient Valyrians practiced, which made the Targaryens into dragon lords, but if so, why do the new dragons also follow their Targaryen masters? I mean, there's no blood magic being practiced now, right? The answers to these questions might be far from what you expect, and yeah, it could lie in the very nature of the members of the House of the Dragon who might not be completely human. And in this video, we're going to be exploring every possible theory about why dragons obey Targaryens and the possible reptilian DNA that nobody knows about. So, without further ado, let's get right into it. So there's this beautifully illustrated encyclopedia called A World of Ice and Fire, which basically serves as a companion guide to George R.R. Martin's A Song of Ice and Fire, a story on which Game of Thrones is based. Now, in that encyclopedia, it's revealed that the tales the Valyrians told of themselves claimed they were descended from dragons and were kin to the ones they now controlled. Oh yeah, that's what the book says. I just quoted it. And if we're to believe this, it would seem that the Valyrians had some sort of biological connection with their dragons, and our friends the Targaryens are also Valyrians. In fact, they came to Dragonstone a century before Aegon and his sister wives took over Westeros and consolidated the 6 kingdoms under one rule, because the one kingdom they couldn't bring under their fold was Dorne. Nevertheless, the point is that the Valyrians may have had a deeper connection with the dragons than we care to understand. Maybe the blood magic with which they created dragons was used to create dragon-human hybrids. The proof of this lies in the fact that the Targaryens occasionally have reptilian children that almost look like dragons. Take Maegor, for instance, the son of Aegon the Dragon. Now, as some of you may know, Maegor was a cruel man from the beginning and became king after his older brother Aenys died. Although his son, Jaehaerys, was the rightful heir, Maegor usurped the throne, but his reign was riddled with problems right from the get-go, and so was his quest to find an heir, so much so that most of his children were monstrous, and one of them was even known to be born without any limbs. Likewise, Daenerys' son was known to be blind, covered in dragon-like scales, and possessed the stub of a tail and small bat-like leather wings. Then there's Queen Rhaenyra herself from House of the Dragon, whose daughter with Daemon had several dragon-like birth defects. She was born twisted and malformed, with a hole in her chest where her heart should have been, and also she had a stubby, scaled tail. Needless to say, there have been many instances where Targaryens have had babies with strange features, many of which seem suspiciously dragon-like. Now, we think the reason behind this is blood magic. See, Targaryens used blood magic to create dragons from wyverns and fireworms. Wyverns are basically non-fire-breathing flying lizards. Fireworms were fire-breathing earthly creatures. The ancient Valyrians used their blood magic skills to basically splice the DNA of these two creatures, and that's how dragons came into existence. However, just getting dragons wasn't cutting it for them, especially when there was no way to control these magnificent beasts. So it is possible that the people from Old Valyria used their blood magic on humans and fused their blood with dragon blood, which would ensure that the dragons saw humans as their own, as their friends instead of food. This would also explain why some people say that the Targaryens have dragon's blood coursing through their veins. Also, bonus points, it would explain how and why Targaryens and dragons form an unknowable and almost magical bond, which borders on psychic. I mean, take Daenerys and Drogon, for example. Even before she rode him, Daenerys cried at the same time as Drogon when he was impaled by his spear. It was almost as if she could feel his pain. Then, in Fire and Blood, when Helaena dies by suicide, her dragon Dreamfire somehow understands. Dragons are even known to understand their riders' moods. All of this can only be explained if we believe the theory that the Targaryens do in fact the blood of dragons. Why else would a wild dragon like Sheepstealer or a grand old dragon like Vhagar let kids mount them? So there you have it, you've got your answer, I suppose, but there's much more to it. All we've really talked about is that special connection the Targaryens and dragons might share, but so many years of history with dragons has taught them a thing or two about training them as well. Firstly, we know for a fact that Targaryen dragons are excellent in combat situations. Please note that I am specifically talking about Targaryen dragons, not wild ones like Sheepstealer, at least Sheepstealer from the TV show. And don't worry, we'll be getting to him soon. As I was saying, the Targaryen dragons are good at combat because of the years of training that they undergo, and this training begins right after birth. As seen in the Season 1 episode called The Princess and the Queen, young juvenile dragons are trained to follow several voice commands in High Valyrian, which is the first step towards their basic riding training. In fact, even the riders are trained in these commands. Having said that, if the bond between the rider and the dragon is strong enough, or if they have enough flight time together, dragons understand English commands as well. For instance, in the scenes during the battle at Rook's Rest, King Aegon joins the battle to confront Rhaenys and Meliss. Aegon gives several commands to his dragon in English, and Sunfire follows them with ease. So we believe it's not the language in which you give the commands, but the bond you share with your dragon. Furthermore, the dragons, when they're still young, are fitted with a saddle and reins that are attached to it. And as the dragons grow bigger over time, their scales would also grow, so much so that the scales would actually grow over the saddles, almost to the point where it would become impossible to remove said saddles. Like, they would be fixed in place for all of eternity until the dragon died. And since a dragon, once ridden, was expected to have one rider or another throughout its life, Targaryens saw no point in removing the saddles. Apart from the saddles, though, the Targaryens also fit bolts straight into the scales, more specifically at the base of the dragon's neck, which is where the riding reins were attached. By doing this, the rider could easily signal the dragon about the direction he wished to take. Like if you pulled the left rein toward yourself, it would put pressure on the left side of the dragon's neck, and although he or she wouldn't feel any pain, the dragon would know that you need them to turn to the left. Of course, the books also talk about certain psychic bonds that a dragon shares with its rider, and this bond is easier to make and to mold when the dragon is a juvenile. And although the dragons don't quite realize it, training them with voice commands from a tender age makes them more compliant to the psychic bonds they share with humans. That's why an older dragon being claimed for the first time may experience some sort of discomfort, for instance, Rhaena and Sheepstealer. And this is also why adult dragons who have had a previous rider find it easier to bond with new riders, even if they have diluted Targaryen blood. Case in point, Vermithor, who bonded with Hugh Hammer, and Silverwing, who bonded with Ulf White. But I think now the time is ripe to understand why some dragons won't follow Targaryen commands, and what it was about the bond between Sheepstealer and Nettles in the book that made the dragon obedient to the bastard girl, and what it was about Sheepstealer and Rhaena in the TV series that made that same dragon disobedient to the Targaryen girl. First, let's just clarify once and for all that the TV series combined the characters of Rhaena and Nettles into one single character. In fact, Rhaena is not the only such character. The TV series also combined the characters of Shirako Lohar, the Lycene Admiral, and Recalio Rindoon, the Tyroshi Captain General who had multiple wives and who himself liked to dress as a woman at times. But both of them were men, while the Lohar in the TV show is a woman. Anyways, coming back to Rhaena, the series had already set her up from Season 1 as the Targaryen child without a dragon. That had basically become her whole identity in the family. Kids knew it, adults knew it, the realm knew it. If Arya was the girl with no name, Rhaena was the girl with no dragon. So the idea was that a TV audience would connect more with her than with a new character introduced in the middle of the story, and we kinda get it. Most of the people watching the show haven't read Fire and Blood, the book that chronicles the Dance of Dragons, so they wouldn't really understand who Nettles is in the first place. As for Rhaena, well, she had blood relations with the main family, like she was the daughter of Daemon through Laena Velaryon, and Rhaena also shared an emotional history with each of the major characters and was betrothed to Prince Luke, who was killed by Aemond and Vhagar in what could be considered as blowing the biggest war trumpet as far as the dance is concerned. So when she finally claimed a dragon, it felt like her greatest wish had come true. But in Westeros, no good wish goes unpunished, and this whole win became a monkey's paw situation for Rhaena. Sheepstealer went totally berserk, attacking the Triarchy as well as the Valyrian fleets, despite Rhaena constantly pleading for it not to do so. One thing we want to make very clear at this point is that Sheepstealer isn't evil, it's simply a wild animal thrown into a battle full of noise, fire, arrows, ships, and of course terror. On top of that, he was hit with some flaming shots, so of course he panicked. Vermax and Moondancer had spent their entire lives with some level of rider contact and training, while Sheepstealer had none of that. Rhaena assumed Sheepstealer understood her because he let her mount him after she said Laikiri, meaning calm. But the idea here was that he didn't actually understand the word. He sensed the Targaryen blood, reacted to the gentle tone, which is very different from obeying a command. Another important detail was the saddle issue. Sheepstealer was a wild dragon, so no one had ever fitted him with a saddle or reins. That meant Rhaena had to ride him bareback, similar to Daenerys in Game of Thrones, but the deeper problem here was the bond itself. Sheepstealer had never had a rider, so when Rhaena climbed on his back, he experienced that strange psychic link with a human for the first time. With young dragons, voice training helps them get used to the dragon-rider bond over time, which was also why adult dragons with past riders were easier to claim. Sheepstealer had none of that preparation, so when Rhaena linked with him, he reacted like his mind had been invaded, which was kind of true if you think about it. This could be compared to those beasts from the Avatar movies reacting when you form a bond with them, but while those creatures calm down after a while, the same could not be said for Sheepstealer. In the end, Rhaena basically got the dragon she wanted, but Sheepstealer got a mental shock, and Rhaena paid the price for it by being somewhat responsible for Jace's passing. And no matter how much she tried to plead with Sheepstealer not to attack, didn't listen. All that high Valyrian was of no use because the bond between the rider and the dragon just wasn't strong enough. So, to sum things up, dragons obey Targaryens for two reasons. First, they sense that the Targaryens probably have a bit of dragon blood in them, and second, their bond with the Targaryen riders becomes super strong over time because they are essentially trained since birth. If the rider lacks any of those things, the dragon's gonna start acting like Charizard from Pokemon when Ash tries to give him orders. Sadly though, that's all we got for you this time, folks. If you enjoyed this video, please consider hitting those like and subscribe buttons because those two small clicks help us tremendously, bringing you more of these awesome videos. Otherwise, thanks for watching, stay safe out there, and we'll see ya in the next one.